Good afternoon. I would like to say welcome to all our members. This is a Clinical Engineering Association of South Africa, or KISA webinar. Welcome to our members, our associate members, and also welcome and thank you to our corporate members, which make these webinars possible. Today's topic will be ensuring a safe, clean, and sterile device, the value of ultrasonic cleaning and low temperature sterilization. My name is Helen Potgieter. I am a representative of KISA as the committee member for Gauteng. And our two guest speakers are Xana Jardine and Gerhard van Deventer. I will do a short introduction, and then I will hand over to Xana and Gerhard to do the presentation. A couple of housekeeping rules is that we would like everybody to keep their microphones muted for the duration of the presentation. This is not going to be an interactive session, but you are welcome to make any notes or comments or questions in the chat box, and we will keep record of that. And we've made a provision for the last 10 minutes to go through those and see if we could answer some of them. Introduction to Xana. Xana Jardine is a clinical specialist in decontamination. She holds a nursing master's degree from the University of Witwatersrand, has presented at a variety of congress on her specialty area, the decontamination of medical devices. Xana was elected chairperson for the CFSA, that's this CSSD Forum of South Africa in 2018. She represents them on the South African Bureau of Standards Technical Committee for medical devices and sterilization of healthcare products, also ARSU, and is a member of CSC, which is the Central Sterilization Club in the UK. Now, Xana has quite a resume, but in a nutshell, she has worked in nursing positions in Netcare and is currently at SafMed since 2010. As a clinical specialist in decontamination, and she's the head of education. Then we have Gerhard van Deventer. He started a business called Medical and Veterinary Services in 1994, doing repairs and maintenance on general medical and hospital equipment. He joined the SafMed team in 2001 in the technical department, doing all installations, maintenance, and servicing of the stairs, and then they together started with theatre tables, and they grew to a full range of Skin and famous products, as we know SafMed business today. He is currently the managing director of Medical Master, together with his colleague Pierre Theron as the technical director. Gerhard has done several trainings in Steris factory sessions in the US, France, Switzerland, as well as Ken in Denmark. Welcome, Xana. Over to you to start your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Confirm that you can see the screen, please.
We can.
Excellent. Thank you very much for letting us present today. This presentation is brought to you by SafMed and SafMed Education. SafMed has been your solutions partner for the last 30 years in both the CSST and the operating room environment. Today's topic, ensuring a safe, clean and sterile device, the value of ultrasonic cleaning and low temperature sterilization. The focus of today's presentation will be mostly clinical, trying to explain from our side, the nursing side, to you guys who make these important purchasing decisions, why it is we need low temperature sterilizers and ultrasonic cleaners, and what their value is, and what's happened in the world that's changed that's making them more and more and more important. Basically, we'll focus on why the topic, cleaning in the South African setting. What do we know? How's it going? What happens? What we've seen in the field? Then we'll focus a bit on ultrasonic cleaners and low temperature sterilization methods themselves, and sum up what we've covered for today. Right, well, why this topic, you may ask? Well, some of the main drivers for ultrasonic irrigators specifically, and the need for low temperature sterilizers, is the move towards less invasive surgical techniques. We started with minimal invasive surgery, often of course called keyhole surgery, in around about 1990 in South Africa. And if reading some stats from a few years ago, already then at that point, 60% of all surgery in the USA was performed using minimally invasive techniques. And if you look around our hospitals in South Africa, you'll see that more and more surgery is being done using minimal invasive techniques. I'm sure you've seen news headlines of procedures being done in Cape Town and provincial and private hospitals using all these fancy techniques. Of course, the value add of minimal invasive surgery is that the patient can recover quickly. There's often less chance of developing an infection, patients discharged quicker from the hospital, and generally they'll resume their normal lives or get to work quicker than they would with open surgery. This is, of course, expanded. We started just with good old laparoscopic diagnostic work, and now we do all sorts of fancy things like single-site surgery, NOTES, which is natural orifice transluminal endoscopic surgery. So we take your gallbladder out through your mouth. We haven't done it yet in South Africa, but I can't wait to see one. And then the acronym RAS, robotic assisted surgery. With these types of surgery, we have instruments that have been designed that are very complex and they're delicate, and they're not that easy to clean necessarily. And often the ones, especially those associated with the robotic assisted surgery, can be moisture and heat sensitive. And of course, they can't just be sterilized in an autoclave. This is an interesting paper published in the American Journal of Infection Control in 2013, published by Alpha. Alpha publishes quite a lot in the area of decontamination sciences. Alpha states that the article itself talks to the importance of monitoring and improving the effectiveness of clinical, medical, and surgical device cleaning. We really and truly need to know that we've cleaned things properly. In this particular article publication, Alpha notes that automated cleaning is the better choice versus manual cleaning, and that there is a great chance for the potential of infection or transmission of infection to occur if instruments, especially those with channels or inner cavities, have not been properly cleaned. Now, in theory, our CCT staff are meant to be cleaning down the lumens of various instruments using lumen brushes if they do a manual process to begin with. Some do, some don't. Some remember to do the cleaning of the lumens before they place the device in the washer. Some forget to, and some don't necessarily have all the lumen brushes that they need, or the ones of the right sizes. It's very important to worry, because I think it's important to worry about lumen devices, and I'll explain that why now. If you look at the image on the right, this is some instruments, or these are some instruments that are found in various CCT settings. Some of them actually were in doctors' rooms, ready to be used on patients. In research that was done in the South African setting, a total of 303 devices and instruments were tested for residual proteins. Of those tested, 26% of the needle holders, 7% of the diathermy forceps, and 11% of the vaginal speculums were tested, and they tested positive for residual protein. If a device tests positive for residual protein, it means it was not properly cleaned. And as we all know, a device that hasn't been properly cleaned can never be disinfected or sterilized for that matter. Needle holders, diathermy forceps, and vaginal speculums can all be processed either manually in an automated washer disinfector, or in fact in an ultrasonic cleaner. Laryngoscope blades are a little bit trickier because they can generally only be cleaned manually, of course, depending on the instructions for use, but most of the blades need a manual clean, can't go in a washer or in fact in an ultrasonic cleaner at all. Now, if you take a look at the image on the right, this is what I found over the years, and including in that research, in the inside of Yankow sucker nozzles. Some of these devices, or some of that debris, does test positive for residual proteins. Sometimes it doesn't, because it's been around for so long, you don't realize or don't pick up proteinase material in the debris, but it's still debris. And that's debris which is a foreign body that can potentially end up in our patients. Laryngoscopes, of course, Yankow suckers can be washed in an automated washer disinfector if you have the right connections. And of course, we need to get through the lumens. So ideally, these kinds of devices should be reprocessed in an ultrasonic cleaner. And that is an ultrasonic cleaner with a lumen flush. If you have a look at the design inside this actual Yankow sucker, this is from a paper published in 2012 already in the Operating Room Association Operating Room Nurses Journal, which is an American publication. The design of this Yankow sucker makes it really, really difficult to clean it with a brush. To get in the front of it, or get in the tip, or to get on the rear of the instrument, you need a really thin diameter brush. That thin diameter brush, once it gets into that large chamber in the center of there, is not going to have any effect. So honestly, how else can you clean this other than in an ultrasonic cleaner with a lumen flush capability? So what we've focused on already now, we've spoken a little bit about why this topic, why does it matter, and it's all about the change of surgery and the complexity of the devices. We now understand, or hopefully we've shared some of the research from the South African setting. That research is from a few years ago already, so it'll be quite interesting to see if we repeated it, what kind of information we'd get out of it now. Let's move on to talk about ultrasonic cleaners themselves. Now, as clinical engineers, I'm sure you already know the basic components of an ultrasonic cleaner, and probably far more so than I do, to be honest, because this is what you do for a living. But of course, we need a bath, we need the transducers, we need the ultrasonic generator, and we need water. The generator, as we know, will send a signal, normally at around 37 kilohertz, to the transducers. The transducers will convert the energy into intense high-speed vibrations. The vibrations will create the pressure waves in the fluid. The waves will compress the water molecules, and we'll end up with cavitation. The compressed water molecule implodes. That implosion then loosens the soil or the patient debris from the instrument. When I'm teaching this, I normally say it creates a sucking effect, because I think it's the best way to describe it. It's the easy way to describe how well an ultrasonic cleaner is going to suck off debris. So now on the next slide, Gerhard is going to describe some of the components of an ultrasonic cleaner in more detail. Gerhard, over to you. Just giving Gerhard a second to find the mute button, or hopefully he can unmute.
Sorry about that. I'm Gerhard from Medical Master, as was said earlier. Looking at the machine from the bottom, it is not the way the normal people using it will see this machine. And you can see all the different wiring and pipes and little articles. If you can look at the top, it is marked. There's a chemical pump. On the right-hand side, there's CPE pump 1, CPE pump 2. There's a pressure switch, there's PC boards, there's transducers. So very, very often people say, but why should we service this machine? They can't really understand, there's not many moving parts. But the little pumps is very sensitive. They often get clogged with patient debris, especially if the staff is using the machine and haven't changed the small disposable filters. You can also see the pressure switches that control the pressure of the flow, which is running through the instruments, which must be set at specific pressures. All of these parts need to be checked and cleaned during the service. And of course, the different manufacturers will stipulate different service intervals. Some manufacturers state that the ultrasonic should be serviced every 6 months, but that is in our case as well. But other manufacturers may be different.
Thank you, Gerhard. So in the next slide, we're going to now talk about, I'm going to describe different types of ultrasonic cleaners. I'm sure you know this already, but just as a reminder. So ultrasonic cleaners can be divided into 3 categories. This definition I used out of the American Association of Medical Instrumentation Guidelines, the AMI standards, just to give us a broad outline. Ultrasonic cleaners or ultrasonic baths, of which we have various makes and models, of course, different sizes of baths are ideal for flat instruments, ideal for our instruments. And please remember, if you are using ultrasonic cleaners to clean our instruments, please keep a separate bath for our instruments. Don't mix ours with other instrumentation. Then we have ultrasonic irrigators, which is a bath with a lumen irrigation component to it, designed for all types of instruments, especially instruments with lumens, because of that ultrasonic irrigation, that lumen flush that is so critical. And that's how we're going to clean some of those really complex devices. Then we can get ultrasonic washer disinfectors, so baths with lumen irrigation and a thermal disinfection rinse. Well, why is that so exciting? Well, a thermal disinfection rinse, of course, makes it a bit safer to use to manage the instruments afterwards. That rinse normally is around 90-odd degrees. Again, far better for us to handle instruments that have gone through a thermal disinfection rinse cycle. Often these types of devices may have a dedicated cycle for things like Deventer instrumentation. Here's an image of a fine sucker, or plastic sucker, a number of different names for this very fine suction that you can see connected to the device. It's using a specific connector. This type of ultrasonic cleaner will clean the inside of the device as well as, we said, ensuring a lumen sonic irrigation or flush. Each make and model will specify the ultrasonic frequency as well as the pressure for flushing, and that could be around about 3 bar, for example. It's really important to use the correct size attachment and secure the attachment so that you can really get the inner lumens nicely cleaned. As you can see, or as you can imagine, as the flush comes through, we displace the air that's within the instrument, and all of those nice sonics are going to help loosen the debris that sits on the inside of an instrument. I cannot think of any other way to clean especially a Yankow sucker with that strange design that it's got with any other lumen device or any other method of cleaning, should I say. This is a snippet of manufacturer's instructions for use for Deventer from Intuitive Surgical. And the reason for sharing this is because what I want to get across is the importance of following instructions for use. All manufacturers, when they produce instruments, have to go through a validated process, and they will give you a set of guidelines on how to clean and how to process devices. And they'll stipulate what can be used in order to achieve that objective. And if something happened to you, a patient had an infection, you had a court case, the patient sues you, the first thing that anybody's going to ask you is, do you have the instructions for use, and are you following those instructions for use? A very important concept. This is another set of instructions for use that's more specific to orthopedic instruments. And please, when buying new instruments or devices for an operating room or for a hospital or a doctor's room, doesn't matter what the setting is, please always ask for the instructions for use first. Needless to say, to be able to check that you have the equipment that's needed to be able to correctly reprocess those devices. You can see in this example from the manufacturer's instructions for use, it states that devices that are challenging or defined as being challenging designs, like reamers or T-handles and cutting blocks and hinge clamps, for example, in this IFU, they need to be cleaned in an ultrasonic cleaner. The IFU then goes on to say that, for example, first immerse and soak the instrument in enzymatic detergent. They describe how you need to brush them. Then they say, place the instrument in the ultrasonic cleaner fully opened for 15 minutes. It's very, very clear that it's important to follow manufacturer's instructions for use. And the point being that the instructions for use, there are more and more instructions for use that call for the need for ultrasonic cleaning. is we have to bear in mind that we cannot just continue to clean things and reprocess things the way that we've always done it for the last 40 years, because it worked for us. Things are changing, devices are changing, the design of the devices are changing, and the complexity of the devices are changing. So please take that into consideration. Gerhard's going to describe an example of installation requirements for an ultrasonic cleaner.
Okay, this is an example of our machine, the MediSafe, which is more or less the same on most machines, but each manufacturer will stipulate their own installation requirement, which may differ depending on the make and the model of the device. The drawing is an example of the installation requirements for an automated ultrasonic cleaner. That means the machine is taking in hot and cold water, it's taking in its own detergent. There's the electric point where the machine is plugged into electricity. There might be a printer as well. And then you need a drain for the draining of the machine, as well as an overflow drain. So one would need electricity, drain, hot and cold water, basically as a start-off point, depending on which model you have, a manual or an automatic. Thank you.
Okay, before we go into the next slide, of course, important things like a level worktop surface, one that can support the weight of the piece of equipment, will normally be stipulated, and needless to say, the size. Thank you, Gerhard. Next one.
In this case, the manufacturer states the incoming water temperature must be 10% higher than the wash temperature. So the machine will automatically mix your water temperature because you have got a hot and cold connection. But the minimum temperature going into your machine should be at about 39 degrees. Your wash temperature roughly 43 degrees. So the ultrasonic cleaner will struggle to reach the desired wash temperature if the incoming hot water is too low. Force of the incoming water must also not be too high, as that can cause splashing, which will activate your level sensors. So in a case where your taps are fully opened, it can cause a splashing effect inside your chamber, which might activate some of the sensors. So the only thing to do, turn down your tap a little bit, just so you have a steady flow of water inside the machine.
Thank you, Gerhard. In this particular example as well, they also include water hardness. They state what the water hardness should be in the water supply, something that people don't often test, or obviously depending on your circumstances, but important to be aware of. Of course, correct use is always important, so it's not just about the piece of equipment, but it's also how we use that piece of equipment. Starting off with knowing that the device that you're about to process in the ultrasonic cleaner can actually go in the ultrasonic cleaner, or is meant to go in an ultrasonic cleaner. It always helps to remove gross soiling, which means a pre-rinse, because a lot of soiling can decrease the efficacy of the cleaning, so a point to consider. Degassing is an important process. Some machines are automated and will include degassing as part of the cycle. Others won't, so an important point to bear in mind. Rinsing, instruments have to be rinsed after washing, no matter what device they've been washed with, whether it's manual or in a washer disinfector. And again, depending on the cycle selected, it may be included, rinsing may be included, or you may need to remove the device from the ultrasonic bath and then rinse it afterwards. Instructions for use again, the manufacturer will stipulate how you are to use the ultrasonic cleaner, what cycles there are, what the differences are. They'll also include the fact that you need to clean and disinfect your ultrasonic bath, and you need to do that regularly. While the ultrasonic cleaner is functioning, you need to keep the lid closed. In some of the automated models, if you try open the lid, the cycle will stop. You close the lid, it might then abort the cycle depending on the make and the model of the machine. But the reason for that is to protect you. And there are quite a few published papers around the aerolization of microorganisms within the CSSD environment if you leave the lid open. Some nice articles around that in the Central Sterilization Journal that I read last month. So please remember to keep the lid closed. Never leave water standing overnight, please. You can get this incredible development of endotoxins in the water, and those endotoxins can end up on devices and instruments, especially on our instruments. It can result in TAS, toxic anterior segment syndrome. It really is not great for a patient. Also, of course, there are certain devices and types of materials that can't be processed in ultrasonic cleaners. You shouldn't be putting plastic items in there, or soft metal, and of course, rigid telescopes don't belong in an ultrasonic cleaner. Again, the importance of having a manual, a set of instructions for use, and that we've all read them. Gerhard's going to take us through some more bits now on this slide.
On this picture, you can see on the left the white sensors. The top one is your overflow sensor. The one just below is your normal water level. And the one right at the bottom of the chamber is your minimum or drainage water level. So in the case where, as Xana has mentioned before, your machine is not 100% level, you will find that you've got water in the bottom of the machine, and the bottom sensor is still picking up that there is water, so the machine will just keep on draining. And you cannot stop it because of the water is still activating the sensor. On the right-hand side top is a picture of the disposable filter that is in the machine that will prevent debris going through your different pumps. And that should be changed minimum on a daily basis. If you look inside on the bottom right, the inside of the chamber, you've got the docking ports, you've got the drain in the one corner, and you've got your disposable filter on the other side. It is important to clean these sensors and to replace the filters as described in the manual for different makes of machines. A good practice will be to clean these sensors before every new wash cycle. There are debris getting stuck to the sensor, which causes it not to work properly. So if your level sensor is not working properly, and it will go over onto your flooding, which is the top one, it is a problem, and it is a frustration to get the machine to work properly again. If there is splashing, here you can see why I was talking about the splashing. That will activate your level sensor maybe too early when the machine is not filled yet, or it may activate your top sensor, which will cause overflow.
Thank you, Gerhard. So again, this is just an example of one particular make and model. There will be differences and variances depending on the ultrasonic cleaner in question. But ultimately, follow the instructions for use, please, and read the manual. There's an interesting paper published in a dental journal, in fact, looking at the efficacy of cleaning dental instruments manually or in an ultrasonic cleaner. I have to tell you that this particular paper was not nice to read, because it actually said in this particular incident that the manual cleaning method turned out to be better than the automated one, or the ultrasonic cleaner in this case. And the reason for that, as they clearly understood, was the fact that the efficacy of the ultrasonic valves had been compromised because they hadn't been tested periodically, and they indeed hadn't been serviced. So it's important that we make sure that our ultrasonic cleaners do what it is they're supposed to do, and that we look after them and service them and maintain them. It is true that automated cleaning is the way to go, but if we don't look after the device, we're not going to achieve the effect that we need to. The image on the right is one that I nearly cried that particular day doing an audit in a particular CSSD. The contaminant over there is fungi. I mean, really, do we really want fungus growing in our ultrasonic cleaner? So that's a bath that's been left with the water in it for an extended period of time. Really, it's very sad to see this. For me, it's incredibly sad if I see an ultrasonic cleaner that's just not used properly or not even looked after properly. A very sad state of affairs. Okay, so we've covered ultrasonic cleaning. Now to go into a little bit more about low temperature sterilization as a principle, as a concept, should I say. Just as a reminder, of course, different types of sterilization that we will find in the clinical setting. Dry heat we tend to find in waste management environment, not really in the clinical setting. Moist heat, generally steam sterilization, as you know it, most cost effective, most common, and used for standard surgical instrumentations, linen, bowl packs, those kind of devices. And then low temperature sterilization modalities, and they are there for heat and moisture sensitive devices. Low temperature sterilization is a chemical process. Steam sterilization is a mechanical process. Low temperature sterilization is a chemical process. It's sterilization that generally takes place at less than 60 degrees C, and as we said already, for heat and moisture sensitive devices. In the South African hospital setting, you're likely to come across these three modalities in essence: ethylene oxide, low temperature steam formaldehyde, and hydrogen peroxide sterilizers. There, of course, are some differences between these different modalities. We'll cover a couple of them now. The installation requirements for EO, low temperature steam formaldehyde, and hydrogen peroxide are slightly different, of course. EO, we require a separate room, and there is a building code around that. For low temperature steam formaldehyde, that is a machine that, of course, works as an autoclave and can work as a low temperature formaldehyde as well. That therefore needs water, steam, and a drain. And generally, hydrogen peroxide-based sterilizers will require electricity, perhaps three-phase or single-phase, depending on the device itself. And there might be certain nuances around the room temperature or the environment in which we install it from that perspective. The length of the cycle, while that is something that really matters to us from a clinical perspective, heat and moisture sensitive devices are generally quite expensive. And as we know, they're delicate. And we generally don't have that many of them. So the shorter cycle times is where there's a lot of value add for us. EO will depend on the make and the model, of course, to the best of our knowledge, between 4 to 12 hours. Low temperature steam formaldehyde, again, between 4 to 6 hours. But often we run that machine as an autoclave during the day and as a low temperature sterilizer in the evening. So we have to take into account the time frame for it to cool down. And then hydrogen peroxide models, it depends again on the make and the model, but around 19 minutes to an hour for a cycle. The sterilant penetration, to be honest, the best form of sterilant penetration is with ethylene oxide. Low temperature steam formaldehyde and hydrogen peroxide are also very, very good. Packaging nuances, there are slight differences in terms of what consumables you can use and what type of packaging you can use for the three different types of sterilants. The chamber size, again, will depend, needless to say, on the make and the model. We tend to buy the low temperature steam formaldehyde as a bit bigger because we use them as autoclaves as well. The killing mechanism is slightly different between the three different chemistries, but importantly, they all have biocidal capabilities, meaning that they have the ability to kill microorganisms. Ultimately, they're going to affect the structure of the microorganism at the end of the day, and therefore kill them, thank goodness. The sterilant can either be a liquid or a gas form, of course, depending on the type of chemistry. In the old days, we used to have those old cylinders for the ETO, which leaked a bit and weren't spectacular. Thank goodness nowadays they will come in little canisters and inserts that are far more contained and really far more reliable. The nuances for ETO in the South African setting, the RSHAC requires us to measure exposure. The nuances we found throughout the world have changed a little bit. ETO, there's a move away from ETO in the hospital setting in general. It's used extensively in industry. Of course, we sterilize everything, multitudes of things in ethylene oxide, gloves, suture materials, all sorts of things. The tendency is less to use them in the hospital environment as such. We are seeing the same thing with low temperature steam formaldehyde because of fixative properties from formaldehyde when it comes to things like Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, but an increase in the use in many countries on hydrogen peroxide-based low temperature sterilization. This is an article published in the Clinical Services Journal written by Dr. Georgia Alzivalopoulou. Dr. Georgia has presented a few times for us in South Africa, in fact, at our Africa Health conferences. It's always nice to see a paper written by her. In this, she talks about the increased use of vaporized hydrogen peroxide in hospital settings as well. So I'm just going to go through one or two slides that cover the points she raised in this particular publication. She reminded us that residual cleaning chemistries can interfere with vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilization. It's important that we thoroughly clean and that we thoroughly rinse our instruments and then dry them before putting them into the vaporized hydrogen peroxide cleaner. The cycle will start with an initial vacuum. When that vacuum is drawn, a small amount of residual water can and will evaporate. It's what we want it to do. The evaporation of the water, however, can cause pressure in the sterilizer chamber to rise. And if there's an excessive amount of moisture, this will cause a relatively high pressure change in the chamber. And that's going to result in a failure or some form of response alarm, pressure too high. And as a result of that, in her article, she goes on to say that considering a vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilizer that incorporates a conditioning phase, and that conditioning phase that aids in the removal of residual moisture prior to sterilization phase is quite important. You may realize, of course, that if we're using steam the whole time, we tend to not be as focused on drying our instruments that much. But when you're using vaporized hydrogen peroxide, you do need to make sure that your instrument is nice and dry before you start. Here's an example of vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilization cycle that does include a conditioning phase. Here, the machine will draw its initial vacuum. It pauses for a minute and does a moisture check. If the moisture level is still too high, it draws another vacuum again in an attempt to try to reduce the moisture before we're actually injecting the sterilant. The sterilant had been drawn up from the cup but held in the reservoir until the moisture level is correct. If the moisture level isn't correct at this point, the machine will, in this particular instance, will cancel or abort the cycle, but not having actually injected the sterilant. So that conditioning phase generally helps us reduce the number of aborts from residual moistures because it gives a little extra vacuum and hopefully tries to dry what's there. If that all fails, of course, we have to unpack and start the process all over again with that device. It officially needs to go through the cleaning, repacking process. So we'd like to try to avoid those kind of aborts. Vaporized hydrogen peroxide has a great material compatibility, compatible with a wide range of materials. As you can see here on this list, here's an example of some nylon and polyethylenes and silicone, stainless steel, Teflon, titanium, all important, I want to say ingredients. This is not a cake, all important components and materials that instruments of today are made of. There's a list of some images of the kind of things that really and truly benefit from vaporized hydrogen peroxide low temperature sterilization setting: batteries, cameras, lifeguard cables, cystoscopes, laryngoscope blades, ultrasound transducers, flexible endoscopes, and drills. Here are some images of the things that we tend to process in South Africa in our low temperature sterilizers. That's not what they were designed for. We often use low temperature sterilization for the things we opened in error and we're going to re-sterilize it, or something that's expired and we want to try and re-sterilize it to keep it going. And that's what we end up doing. That's obviously not the ideal thing. It's not what these devices were designed for. We did some informal research in one of our hospitals in the Johannesburg setting, where we purchased 2 brand new batteries. We marked them, and the one battery went through the normal hospital process, which in that particular instance was using flash, or the correct term, of course, is immediate use steam sterilization. That was their normal methodology. And the other battery then only went through vaporized hydrogen peroxide cycles. And as you know, when you put your battery onto the charger, it gives you a bit of an indicative reading of how much battery life is left. And we managed to get another couple of months lifespan out of the battery that went into the low temperature sterilizer. So that at least gives me a good feeling about the fact that they say, you know, they say that low temperature sterilization is gentle on our instruments. And I certainly felt that was quite true at the time. Vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilization has been around for a number of years, and there are numerous published papers that refer to its efficacy. This particular one from the American Journal of Infection Control, which was published in 2017, titled An Economic Analysis of the Benefits of Sterilizing Medical Instruments in Low Temperature Sterilization Systems instead of steam. It is true that these chemistry-based sterilizers can sometimes be a little bit more expensive, or it feels more expensive to run them. And in here, the results state quite clearly. Overall, our results showed that the increased sterilization costs are outweighed by the savings associated with less frequent repairs. Their conclusion was that in our model, it shows that it's likely to be a good decision for large healthcare facilities to invest in low temperature sterilization systems. As I explained at the beginning of this presentation, the changes in how we perform surgery is driving the need for low temperature sterilization methods, as well as the need for ultrasonic cleaning. As an example, for example, from Intuitive again, on the reprocessing instructions or the sterilization for endoscopes, and a validated process, how that can be sterilized. You may have heard recently Carl Storz released an urgent device recall notice. It's not the device itself, it's a recall on the reprocessing methodology on certain of their urology endoscopes, where it states that they are no longer endorsing the use of OPA with particular makes and models of urology scopes, not all of them, specific models, please. But those IFUs do state that these scopes can be sterilized in vaporized hydrogen peroxide sterilizers. Again, manufacturer's instructions for use calling for the need for low temperature sterilization and vaporized hydrogen peroxide. In the next slide, Gerhard will chat a little bit more about installation and servicing.
Okay, for this specific machine, the installation requirements will still depend on the make and the model of the device. But with the VHP sterilizer, there's no need for any water or drainage. The only need, or the only utility that the hospital need to supply for this machine is three-phase electricity in the case of the big machine, and single phase for the smaller machine. So from a hospital point of view, it's a very easy installation. For the supplier, there's a lot of tests that we have to perform to make sure the machine is level and that everything is working 100% the way it should. The technician will, of course, ensure that and make sure that all the necessary checks and balances is done. With your preventative maintenance and servicing, you will get this on your screen. So firstly, if you look at the screen on the left, it is showing you a yellow canister, which is the start of telling you your machine is nearing the time for service. And on the right, you will find the red oil canister which is warning you to say that this is becoming desperate now, you need to service your machine. It will, however, still allow you to continue using the machine, although you will have to confirm the fact that you know the machine is due for servicing. The service intervals is stipulated by each manufacturer. In our case, servicing is required every 6 months or 750 cycles, whichever comes first. And as you know, like with any piece of equipment, the servicing is not done. If the servicing is not done, you run risk of damaging your equipment. Specifically, the oil change on the vacuum pump is extremely important.
Thank you, Gerhard. So pretty well in a nutshell, what have we covered today? We've covered the importance or the move towards minimal invasive surgical techniques and how that is changing in our world, how that's changing in the South African setting. And that's, of course, driving the need for different types of decontamination methodologies, including that of ultrasonic cleaners and including that of low temperature sterilization. We've run through some of the benefits of ultrasonic cleaning. We've run through the nuances of low temperature sterilizers. And if I can please, the most important thing that really, out of anything that I want to get across today is that, can we please make sure that we follow the manufacturer's instructions for use? Can we please make sure that we actually have a set of manufacturer's instructions for use and that we follow them? Please help us in the CSSD to be able to do that. Thank you very much. As a matter of interest, SafMed Education has run numerous webinars over the last 3 years. We do have a YouTube channel. If you just Google SafMed YouTube, you will find us. We have over 29 recordings of webinars now available. There are a multitude of topics. The one on sterility assurance monitoring may be quite interesting for you or not. I don't know. Let's see, have a look, see. And if you'd like, let me know. I'll send you the link to the post-webinar tests, and then we hand out a certificate of attendance. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you, Xana. If you can maybe just put that last slide up again. Sorry, I think maybe if you can leave it for like a minute while we are addressing any questions, just so everybody can see what courses are available.
Alrighty, I lost permission. I've got permission back again. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry, I just also want to take a note of it. Then I do not see any questions right now. If I'm going to leave it for about 5 minutes if there's anybody that would like to add anything. Otherwise, I saw that there was a couple of people that left early or joined late. This presentation will obviously be available again on our YouTube channel in about a week's time or so. We'll just see when we will be ready with that. And then I also just want to say thank you to Dieter, who was our technical support today. He's the one that makes sure that everything runs smoothly. Thanks a lot, Dieter. I don't know, Dieter, if there was any questions that came to you directly. I'm just looking at the general chat. There wasn't anything from my side. If you can just check for me, but I don't see anything. But then you are also welcome, Dieter, you can maybe put the last or our pre-presentation slideshow up again just to get your contact details on the screen. And should there then be any other questions that anybody thinks of afterwards, you are welcome to send that and we will make that a part of our response on either YouTube or we can also answer you directly. Okay, no questions received. Thank you very much. Thank you, Xana. Thank you, Gerhard, for your time and the very informative presentation. And we'll see you at our next webinar.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.